What's up, big dogs? Coming back at you with the bi-weekly Q&A. Do we have an intro for this?
Oh, we got an intro, Mike, but we don't
Hell
really have
yeah.
an intro.
We got a non-intro, so hit it. All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks for posting up questions in the Discord. Noah and I went through. Unfortunately, we can't get to every single one of them. We picked out 4 or 5 that we think are probably most applicable to across the board, and we're just going to run through them now. Noah, kick it.
So first off, we have a beautiful name. Fuck Tom Brady with 2 Y's, so he really feels it. And 2 C's also. He says, when taking a future approach / tank year 1 approach to a Superflex Dynasty startup, is it a wise strategy to fade quarterback because Lawrence, Fields, etc. can fix that problem immediately starting next year? Mike, I know you've had your fair share of complete rebuilds. I believe you call it productive struggles. Have you ever been in the situation where you completely fade the quarterback position despite it being a super flex league because you'll have the assets to get a Trey Lance, a Trevor Lawrence, a Sam Howell, a just Fields in the future? Or do you still want to go out and get maybe a guy like Minshew or a Tannehill or somebody that you believe is still a value so you have somebody in the future you can rely on when you are starting to compete?
Yeah, no, I don't do that. In fact, if you are doing a rebuild, I think it's probably a better idea to actually secure a good quarterback. The reason being, like, even though you're tanking, you don't know how the season plays out. There could be someone that out tanks you, and there could be someone that does worse than you. And in order to get like Trevor Lawrence, or at least to truly feel comfortable landing a Trevor Lawrence, you really want that 101 pick, especially this year when there's like really no stud running back like a Jonathan Taylor or like a CEH coming out. I think Trevor Lawrence is probably the clear lock 101 pick, and even Justin Fields and stuff like that. And also, like, relying on one rookie quarterback or even 2 rookie quarterbacks to completely solve your situation is not necessarily the ideal approach, right? Like, the only time I took this approach is in the Destination Devy startup league, but that was a Devy league where I knew I drafted Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields before the start of last season. So I had to reach for Justin Fields even in that scenario. And even then, like, my team is not in the greatest of shape. So I would actually highly recommend you definitely nail down a couple of young quarterbacks and then like really load up on picks to give yourself the best chance of landing a Trevor Lawrence. But relying on a rookie quarterback to come in and just solve your problems right away is not I don't think it's the right approach. I think we've been spoiled by the likes of Deshaun Watson, the likes of Patrick Mahomes, the like of Lamar Jackson. Like, if we don't see another like early season like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson for another decade, like, I won't be surprised at all because those are unicorns.
Yeah, and imagine taking this approach to the 2017 class, and instead of drafting a Josh Allen or Lamar, you got Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen. Like, there's just so much to go wrong. And drafting a good young quarterback like a Daniel Jones, like, he's not great in real life, but whatever, or even like a Justin Herbert or some other young guy you believe in, like a Kyler Murray, having those 2 or 3 guys isn't going to single-handedly take you out of the one-on-one contention. You still have to have a complete team to be good in fantasy. And
Yeah.
sure, there might be other teams doing productive struggles and trying to rebuild, but you having a young quarterback who may have his inconsistencies but may help you in the future because they are young, they are still growing as players and prospects. It's not too risky because it's not going to take you over the top by having those 2 guys and a bunch of frauds in your flex spots and your RB1, RB2, and tight end spots. What I would say is, if you're in a startup, just like trade your mid-round picks for a bunch of future assets, and then grab, if you want to keep a few mid-round picks, use that to grab like a Tannehill or whatever, a bunch of guys that you think are at a value. So by the time, your other rookie picks, whether it be wide receivers or running backs or tight ends, start to grow into their prime, you still have a quarterback that is producing for you, so you can be competitive in at least one window. Because if you are not drafting, if you're relying on one draft class to keep you in a productive and a competitive window, it's not going to work out because wide receivers have different age apexes for when they produce compared to running backs, compared to quarterbacks, compared to tight ends. So I would just say get a good mix of, or at least invest in some young quarterbacks, even though they might give you points here and there. It's not going to take you over the top.
Yeah, and adding Trevor Lawrence, like, even if you have like 3 or 4 other quarterbacks, is never a bad thing because you can either
Mm-hmm.
trade him or trade one of them. So, like, I guarantee you, like, if Trevor Lawrence comes in before he even plays a snap, you will be able to trade him for a ransom. So I wouldn't really be worried about like adding a Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, etc. I would still draft those young QBs early.
Yep. And with that, we have the next question by Adi Van Sets. He asks, with all the Miami receivers opting out, is Preston Williams a wide receiver 1? And is Mike G, he didn't have the respect to call Mike Gesicki, is Mike G a tight end 1? I'll start off by saying Preston Williams is not a wide receiver one because he is not even the wide receiver one on his own team. Devontae Parker, I've been seeing people take like these bets. What's the over-under for Devontae Parker, Devontae Adams targets this year? Is it 300 and a half? To be honest, each one might hit 300 apiece this season. So I would not be surprised. He's going to be fed the ball very heavily. Preston Williams is coming off an ACL tear. It was probably around the same time as Cooper Kupp had the previous year, and Cooper Kupp bowled out coming off the ACL tear, but not everybody recovers the same, and not everybody's part of the LA Rams offense. He is, in fact, on the Miami Dolphins, which isn't great, and almost that alone, like I'm a big fan of Preston Williams, but that alone, coming off the injury, being on the Dolphins, is enough for me to say he's not a wide receiver one. I don't think he's a wide receiver two either. I think his upside is like a middling wide receiver three. I don't think that's too bold of a take to say. As far as Mike Gesicki, sure, he could be a tight end one, but
Trash.
Jason Witten was a tight end one last year. And how often do you feel comfortable starting Jason Witten unless it's like a 2x tight end premium league where you get like somehow 15 points per reception? So being a tight end one doesn't really mean much unless you're like a top 6 or 7 guy. So sure, Mike Gesicki, I'll give it to you. Maybe he's a tight end one, but that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, look, Preston Williams, love him. Not a wide receiver one. I don't think there's a wide receiver one on the Dolphins team, to be honest. I think Devonta Parker is even a wide receiver two, but we know the delta between like, wide receiver 12, like wide receiver 20 something is really not that big at all. So I do not think Preston Williams is a wide receiver one. I don't think the Dolphins are going to support two wide receivers, two top 24 wide receivers, and a tight end one. Even though, like Noah said, a tight end one is a totally meaningless title. Honestly, we should switch the definition of tight end one to be a top 6 tight end. Because if you're not like a top 5, top 6 tight end, you're basically a streamer and you don't matter. And with all the volume in the world, like with all the stars aligning for Mike Gesicki, he was just straight up trash last year. Okay, like one of the worst. He's one of the least efficient tight ends to ever grace the NFL over the last 2 years. And those types of guys, if you don't have efficiency, you don't retain volume over the long run because targets are earned. And from what we've seen, Preston Williams is good to go football activities. I don't know if that means he starts week 1, but I don't really want to invest in a guy that's on a countdown from losing his job, because as soon as Preston Williams comes back, you can bet your ass that Gesicki's going to go back to what he was, which is basically a swim short Olympics mascot on the NFL field, because that's basically all he's going to do. I'm like entirely confident in this, and I've seen way too much like Mike Gesicki hype videos on Twitter, and I just don't get it, because when you're going for that late round tight end, you're going for someone that has like legit top 5 upside, and Gesicki does not have legit top 5 upside in any world, never mind this world. So I would definitely fade Gesicki. I would grab Preston Williams at a discount in Dynasty. I think he's a good buy. And in redraft, honestly, I would just kind of either grab him with a super late round pick if you're in deeper draft, or just fade him altogether and wait for him to kind of hit waivers after he starts off slow coming back from ACL injury.
Yeah, and I know the prime time to like pick a tight end that's going to break out is somebody who's extremely athletic that hasn't been given the opportunity. Mike Gesicki is extremely athletic, but he's also been given the opportunity. There's all these stats, and like people have said he's going to be the slot receiver this year, and then people release stats like, oh, he actually ran the most slot routes for any tight end ever. I'm like, well, you can't be a better slot receiver than you were in the past if you sucked at it and you were given the opportunity week in, week out. Grab yourself like a Jonnu Smith or a Chris Herndon if that guy's ever off the couch, and yeah, just fade that man, because even if he is a tight end one, it's not worth the draft capital you're going to sink into him. Next up, we have Conor McGregor's cousin, Notorious Swaggy. He says, my league is usually a redraft league and has been that way for many years. Last year, we finally kept one player as a keeper. How do I convince or push to start a dynasty league? It's been going on, or this is about to be year 8 for them. First off, I'd say tell them to tune into the channel to realize what Dynasty is, or join the Discord, join the Patreon. Some shameless plugs there, but obviously you can't just turn your redraft league into a Dynasty league. You have to create a brand new one. And I would just say, like, start off with a cheaper buy-in and let everybody know that if they want to increase the buy-in from there on out, it has to be a unanimous decision. Like, anything with money has to be unanimous, because if somebody can't afford it, you're not just going to kick them out of the league for it. So I would just say, as you did with your redraft league, just like start off slow. Take them out to dinner first, give them a little back rub, and then fully implant your $50 buy-in dynasty league after that, because people aren't going to want to do something that they are uncomfortable with. They're not going to want to sink, a $200 buy-in year in and year out into a league that they don't really understand, or they have to realize you have to know college prospects and, draft using rookie picks to trade and all that type of stuff. It's completely different from redraft. And because of that, I would just say try to ease it in through like a smaller buy-in. And if you guys like it, then maybe abandon the Dynasty League after year one and create a brand new one with a higher buy-in thereafter.
Yeah, I would say, look, first of all, it's actually the question. That's why we like kind of started doing the more redraft content. And, step one, I would say go to one of our videos, one of our first videos on bunk bed breakdowns is on Nick's channel. And we walked through like how to set up a dynasty league. So that'll be a great source of info for you. And then secondly, like you mentioned that you had like one keeper, right? And transition from keeper to dynasty is like a great move, because what I would do is like go to those guys in your league who were successful with the keeper. So like, who are the guys that picked like the best keepers from last year? Who are the guys that like had Miles Sanders? Who were the guys that got Josh Jacobs, or, some of these young guys that as keepers, because they're going to be the ones that are like, holy shit, like I made a great pick and now I'm like super invested year over year, and like get them to like advocate and be like, yo, like, that little piece of like feeling you felt, like that like partial excitement arousal that you felt, like think about that time for dynasty, because everyone you keep, all of the right moves you make will carry on from now until forever. And if you get a couple of advocates together, like let's say your league is a 12-man team and there's 2 or 3 guys that are really sharp, people that did study the information, people that did do all the research, people that did watch all our videos, like those are the guys that are going to be like your advocates. And if you convince them, they're going to like convince the rest of the league, because, I hate to say it, but like most people are sheep, and sheep like to follow. They like to be herded. So you just got to get the right shepherds in place to kind of herd those sheep in your league. And that's kind of how I would approach it. And just sell that little piece to them and be like, we can enjoy this like tenfold in dynasty format. And I promise you, they will not regret it, because like once you get into dynasty league, like honestly, redraft leagues are still fun, but like you're just never going to want to go back from dynasty. It's going to be a ton of fun. So, but it's really about getting those advocates on your side, so you go to the rest of the league with a proposal instead of just being like, hey, should we go to dynasty, like vote yes or no. You got to go with like 4 people, like, hey, like let's do this, like this is why it's good, these guys enjoy it, we enjoy it, this is why you'll enjoy it. And just like really share that info with them and just educate people. That was like the first hurdle that I had to overcome with converting to redraft to keepers. Like I had to educate like a lot of my league mates, and I would just share all the resources that I had. And, at the end of the day, like maybe that removes some of the edge, but it's more fun when it's more competitive with everyone.
Yeah, if you were to tell me we were going to be in this episode talking about sheeps and shepherds and not mentioning FFC, the fantasy football counselor, I would have thought you were lying. But that was a beautiful analogy, Mike. And with that, we move on to our last question. Tony M, we might as well call him Tony Montana, because I'd love to think that he's in our Discord. He says, outside of Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, who are the top 5 fantasy wide receiver duos that you would be comfortable stacking and starting each week? And questions like this, not that they're hard, but they make you think, because you start to forget some wide receiver duos that you would like. So like a Golden Tate Sterling Shepard is like a very low end one, which like if you play with a bunch of flexes, you can obviously start both of them. But prior to this, Mike and I went through most NFL teams by, this isn't inside look at what experts do. They type in NFL teams and look at the team logos and think real hard about who is good in the NFL. So what I came up with, my list is a DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett duo. That's not a very high passing volume offense, but it's very consolidated, and we saw both of them be very good last year. Obviously, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is one that is a no-brainer. Both of them are basically wide receiver ones. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods is the third one I have up there. I mean, we know the deal with them. They're going to be target hogs. I also have Odell and Jarvis. I know last year it was a lot of volume, not a lot of production, but I do expect a little bit of a change. And my last one would be between these two. I'll go with Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones Jr. I mean, Marvin Jones is criminally underrated year in and year out. He's basically like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2. And I'm just a huge fan of Kenny Galladay. Like when Matt Stafford's on the field, both of these guys are going to produce at least wide receiver 2 numbers for you most weeks. Mike, I know you had one other and probably a few other stacks on your list. So who are you rocking with?
Yeah, I think Nuke Hopkins and Christian Kirk on the Arizona Cardinals. That's a pretty high volume, high paced offense, and that's one that's actually like possible to stack. Christian Kirk's pretty cheap, and DeAndre Hopkins is upper end, but still you can kind of get that stack. I think a pretty sneaky one, a cheap one, I think, is DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault. And we talked about Laviska Shenault being one of the best rookie buys. He's probably one of the only rookie wide receivers that I'm willing to invest in, maybe not even through the draft, just like pick him up in waivers like after a couple of weeks. But I really love DJ Chark. That's going to be a team that's playing from behind. We love Gardner Minshew, so I think that's probably a good one. And then The last one I'll talk about is Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller. So I think everyone's out on Deshaun Watson. I don't really get why, because I think he's a magician. He's, one of the best young quarterbacks to join the league. And even though he lost Hopkins, we've seen what he looks like with Will Fuller on the field. And, he gets to add Brandon Cooks. And granted, both of them are made of like glass, but like if you combine them together, you probably get like one wide receiver one season. So that's another one where it's like pretty cheap and attainable that I'd be comfortable second.
Yep, I like that one too. I feel like people just forget how good Brandon Cooks was because of the one down season he had last year. And I know it wasn't great. Over the first 3 weeks, he was decent. Then he got his concussion. Then he came back. He got concussed again. The guy just couldn't stay on the field. But we forget he was like in that Mike Evans and Randy Moss type of stat where it's like, oh, over the first 4 or 5 years, they put up 1,000 yards. And now he is paired with, I don't think it's brash to say, probably the best quarterback. I guess Drew Brees is probably better at that point. But like a very, very good quarterback. A good pairing that's going to throw to him deep down the field. And when Will Fuller is on the field, he's either going to be the wide receiver 1 on the week or like the wide receiver 27 on the week. So I don't think that's a bad stack either. We obviously love Laviska Shenault. We love DJ Chark. But the thing we love more than all of them is your guys' support. Thank you guys for tuning in to this week's Q&A. If you want to be featured in next week's or 2 weeks from now, join the Discord through our Patreon channel. I believe it's $9.99 a month. In doing so, you can also get involved in redraft leagues, which we are starting to set up right now. $25, $50, $100, and $250 entries. I believe we are close to filling 2 leagues already after only announcing it like once and doing it for less than a week. So if you guys are interested in that, hit it up. Subscribe if you're new. Like if you enjoyed. And you'll see Bunkbed Breakdowns tomorrow. Peace.